And I'd like to start by welcoming everybody. I think we'll be joined by a few more people before too long, but appreciate you uh, making the effort to come. And again, this is a repeat of the first webinar we did 2 weeks ago. That was the first one ever, and I felt it would be good to do it again uh, as a reminder for people who couldn't make the first one, and just so that we could do another one once we have things figured out a little bit more. So this webinar is an introduction to the Alaskan Essences, and we will be showing you some presentations that will help you get a basic understanding of uh, the special qualities of Alaska, uh, what making essences in that part of the world means and how it's unique, and also an introduction to the three different kinds of essences that we have, the flowers, the gems, and the environmentals. We'll go over a couple of technical things. You can use the I'm getting an echo. I'm not sure. Yeah. We're recording this in a couple different ways, so if there is an echo, I'll turn off the other recorder, and that will probably take care of it. But give us a chat, a quick chat message if you can hear us okay, hear me okay, and we'll figure out if there's an echo on this side or on your side. I was going to say, if you have questions, uh, please type them into the chat window whenever you have them. We will get to some of them as we go along, and then we'll get to as many as possible towards the end during the question and answer period. Um, okay, so I think the importance of understanding the difference between the various systems that are out there. One of the things when I get asked this question quite often, the things that people are pretty easily understanding is that when essences are made in different parts of the world, there is going to be a different uh, imprint of that environment that they're made in. So essences from Australia, from Alaska, from England, from wherever, are going to have particular qualities that you won't find in the other ones. So part of what I want to offer today uh, is an understanding of what Alaska brings. And this is something that I talk about it as the background in a painting, that you have the foreground, the subject of the painting is the particular flower that you're working with or the gem. But in the background of that is what we call an intact environment. So it's the Alaskan elements, the integrity of that environment that is uh, sort of like the delivery system for that particular essence. So each essence that's made in Alaska will have this um, energetic container, if you will. And there's four main characteristics that I like to talk about uh, with the Alaskan environment. And hopefully most of these will come through the pictures as you're watching the presentation here. The first thing that I'll talk about in the first characteristic is purity. So there's a purity to the Alaskan environment, partly because, as you see in this picture, it's frozen for the majority of the year, depending on where in Alaska that you live. So this picture was taken about 150 miles northeast of Anchorage, and this is a fairly typical December afternoon at about 30 below, 25 below Fahrenheit, and this is actually a warm day, sort of a pleasant day to be out. But you'll see that one of the characteristics with the purity is the extremes in temperature. So Alaska has a climate that is um, not easy for people to live in. There are less than 1 million people living in Alaska, uh, and the number goes down dramatically in the winter. More people visit in the summer, of course. So there's a purity partly because the land is frozen and the climate is somewhat difficult. Again, depending on where you live in Alaska, if you go further north, the days are even shorter. The temperatures are much colder. For the plants and the animals, this is actually a protection. The difficult climate, the extreme cold temperatures, the snow and so on, actually protects the environment and helps to maintain this level of purity. So uh, I'm going to sort of just put all these characteristics out, at least the first three, and then some of these pictures talk about more than one. So the next one is adaptation. If you imagine as you're going through this presentation, imagine yourself as a plant that is living in one of these areas and having to adapt to these different circumstances. This picture is taken in Bettles, which is a small village on the Koyukuk River in the northern part of the interior of Alaska, and this is actually 35 miles north of the Arctic Circle. And this is a picture taken kind of at the opposite end of the season, June 21st, which is the summer solstice. And it's a picture of the sun not really going down, because summer solstice north of the Arctic Circle means for at least one day during the summer, the sun does not set. And for at least one day during the winter, the sun doesn't come up. So you have this extreme in light. If you live in Fairbanks in December, you maybe have on a clear day an hour and a half of daylight. In the winter, in the summer, it's light all the time. So you have extremes in light, but also in temperature. And this is an old sign that I took a picture of quite a few years ago in Bettles, uh, which shows a couple of interesting pieces of information. One is the elevation. I always like to draw people's attention to that. Most of the interior of Alaska, that's the area between the two massive mountain ranges. The mountains to the south would be the Alaska Range, and then the mountains you saw in the previous picture are the Brooks Range. The area between those two ranges is called the interior of Alaska. Most of this area is flat and a couple of hundred feet above sea level, about 200 meters, or about 600 feet above sea level. Another interesting bit of information is during the last ice age, much of the interior of Alaska was not covered by ice. So you have plants and mosses and lichens and so on that are from before, have a memory, if you will, of before the last ice age. But another piece of information is the average annual mean temperature of 21 degrees, this Fahrenheit, -6 Celsius. So if you average all the days throughout the winter and the summer, you come up with this temperature. So it's to illustrate, again, the difficulty of living and growing as a plant in these areas. Very short growing season. Uh, in Bettles, we tried to grow a garden a number of summers when I was stationed there as a firefighter, and we had the best we ever had was about 50 or 55 frost-free days. So the good news is that the sun shines up to 22 or 23 hours a day, and so the garden plants grew pretty quickly. But it was an interesting process. This is a picture of Denali, the tallest mountain in North America, and this is almost in the center, geographically speaking, of the state. And the reason I like to show this picture, I mean, there's several reasons. One is Denali, uh, translated into the local native language, means the great one or the shining one. And this was the backdrop when I started to make uh, essences in 1983. I made them where this picture was taken in a place called Lake Minchumina. The lake sits on the northern boundary of Denali National Park and Preserve. And so you're looking about 70 air miles directly to this mountain. And it is a beacon of light. It's an energy source that radiates out uh, hundreds and hundreds of miles around. You can see this mountain from Fairbanks and from Anchorage, and it's what I consider to be the spiritual center of Alaska. And it's interesting that I was called to start making the essences uh, in this location. Um, and the other thing I will point out is that with the beginning of the first couple of summers, I was making flower essences at Lake Minchumina, but there was this really strong mineral background with the Alaska range, massive range of mountains. And so even in the beginning with the flowers, there were the minerals there. This is a picture taken within Denali National Park, and I like to use it to illustrate population density, about one person per square mile. And this is important because imagine yourself in this picture as one of those people down at the lower right-hand corner. When you live in a big city like New York or Chicago or Los Angeles or London, there's millions of people around and a lot of people crammed into a fairly small amount of space. And then you come to Alaska and there's this amazing uh, amount of area that you can explore. And pretty much when you come off the airplane and you step out and you get out into Anchorage, and then we have a joke that from 15 minutes from downtown Anchorage, you can actually be in Alaska. Uh, your energy field will respond to this spaciousness by expanding. And so this is an important quality to all the essences is they have this expansive quality of helping a person get a better understanding or a clearer understanding of what's going on in their own energy field. When you're in a very densely populated area, it's harder to do that. Again, part of the reason that you have this pure environment, this intact environment in Alaska is because there's not that many people. Nature still has the upper hand, especially in places like the Denali National Park. Another interesting characteristic, and it goes to a couple of characteristics that I want to talk about, and one of those is transformation. But there's quite a bit of snow and ice. It is starting to melt more with global warming, but they figure about 20% of the surface of Alaska is covered with snow and ice. So it's the third largest ice field outside of Greenland and Antarctica. And This is also a characteristic or part of the characteristic of the purity because glaciers in ice and snow are very purifying. There's a quality which I'll talk about a little bit more that's coming off, and that's the negatively charged ions. Glaciers are massive generators of negatively charged ions, and these are the ones associated with health and well-being. So the presence of all of this ice and snow acts as an amplifier for the qualities that we find in the plant kingdom and the mineral kingdom. And they also act as this cleansing mechanism. So it's a good thing to have all of this there. Um, this is a bit more of a close-up picture of one of the glaciers that we have an essence from. And this picture was taken from a boat that you can get to get on the lake and get closer to the glacier. Um, but it's massive. To get up that close to it, you just cannot believe how much ice there is and how old it is and how much energy is coming off the glacier. You can really feel it when you get that close. Now, we're talking about transformation, and Alaska is also a fire-dependent ecosystem, which simply means that the plant communities, especially the trees, rely on fire to propagate. So there's only 6 different kinds of trees in Alaska, and the spruce, which can account for 3 of those, need fire to open up the cones so that they can uh, you know, create a new forest. So in the lower picture with the fireweed, you have a fire that's been burned maybe 2 or 3 summers ago, and the new forest is already starting. You have the fireweed and different willows coming in, and then eventually you'll have the new trees coming in a couple of years. So the ecosystem actually depends on fire uh, to continue to renew. So you have certain plants in Alaska that are also keyed into this, and we call them earth healers. Um, it's quite dramatic and astounding to be flying, as I did quite a bit when I fought fire in Alaska, and being able to see hundreds of thousands of acres of a particular plant, like the fireweed or the cottongrass. And this is nature simply responding to the event of the fire and saying, okay, well, we'll start over. We know exactly what to do, and we're going to be busy doing that. And this is a wonderful illustration of how nature can start over, help the forest, but also help people start over. So these 2 essences will be coming up for people who have burned themselves out, have gotten too tired, have lost their energy, and need to create a new way of living. So you have this transformation both from the ice and from the fire. Um, Another piece about the ice is that uh, we have something in Alaska called permafrost, and simply means permanently frozen ground. So if you take a map of Alaska and you draw a line about a third of the way down and then another third of the way down, the top third of Alaska is continuous permafrost. So that's the northern interior and then above the Brooks Range. It simply means that if you dig down, in some places, not too much, maybe a couple of feet, you'll run into ice, frozen ground, and actual ice lenses. Um, and the middle third, we have what's called discontinuous permafrost. And this accounts for why the trees are so small. You look in the upper picture, um, these are fully grown spruce trees, black spruce, that are probably 120 to 150 years old, and most of them are about 2 meters tall, about 6 or 7 feet tall. And the reason is because the roots go down through the soil and eventually encounter the frozen ground, and so they have to spread out on top of the ground. So they just can't get that much vertical growth. Now, as the permafrost heats up in the summer because of the warm days, it will melt and some of the trees will fall over. Now, this is happening more and more because the average temperature is rising in Alaska. Summers are getting hotter and the winters are getting warmer as well. So we have a very sort of obvious image of global warming, of massive amounts of these spruce trees just falling over because the little amounts of soil that are there can't support the root systems. But you have a picture forming here of a vegetative layer, a very thin geographical area or topographical area where plants can grow in Alaska. And it's from sea level up to about 2,000 meters or 4,000 feet. Everything has to happen within that layer. And then you have the ice above it and the ice below it. Now there's a couple of slides that I want to show and talk about specialized habitats. And these are wonderful illustrations of how adaptive the plants are in Alaska. So you have the permafrost. This picture was taken in near Bettles in the northern interior, where you have permafrost melting during the summer and creating thousands of these small ponds. Now, the good news is this is where orchids grow in Alaska, and the not so good news is where mosquitoes grow. So if you want to get in and work with the orchids, which I love doing, you have to cover all parts of your skin and have some mosquito protection. Or, yeah, I mean, there have been times when I wasn't adequately prepared and I got literally dizzy from all the toxin that the mosquitoes were injecting. And also probably a loss of blood. So again, the good news is the wonderful terrestrial orchids that we have growing in Alaska. We now have 12 of them in our system, most of them met in areas like this. But another really good favorite specialized habitat is Alpine. So this is the very top area in Alaska where plants will grow. And again, a wonderful illustration of how they can adapt. Very short growing season, about 45 days in this area. And literally maybe 6 to 8 inches of topsoil. All of these plants, because of the short growing season, are growing at the same time. So it's quite a bouquet. If you're standing where this picture was taken and you look down, you'll see about 10 or 15 different flowers growing together. So it's really a good illustration as well of cooperation. So these are, again, all qualities that are coming through into the essences that are made in these specialized areas. Now, as you come down in elevation and get closer to sea level, what happens is the plant families become much larger and they take turns because they have more time to do that. And here you have a field of wild irises. This is actually just a part of the field. It's about 10 acres in total. And the first time I drove by here, it's right next to the highway outside of Anchorage. I almost ran off the road. I'd never seen this many irises growing together. So you have these large plant families, very healthy, very strong. And it's an energy that if you walk out into these irises, you will feel in your body and in your energy system a really strong understanding of what wild iris is doing. There are some other plants growing. The shooting stars will also be in this field. Some buttercups you can see. And also later on, sweetgrass will be growing here. So it's Again, more relaxed environment for the plants, and they respond by uh, growing a little bit longer and taking turns. And a lot of people ask us about the animals. There are people in the world making animal essences. Some people ask me occasionally, why haven't you made animal essences in Alaska? And the answer is that there's such a strong presence uh, in Alaska that they're there in the background. They're part of the environment. Um, Depending on where you are in Alaska, you'll probably see bears or moose, and especially eagles, when you're out making the essences. So they'll be around, and sometimes maybe a little bit too close for comfort. Um, but we wanted to include some pictures of sort of the main iconic animals that you'll see in Alaska. So you have the grizzly bear and the mama moose with twins. Those baby moose are probably a couple weeks old, maybe 3 weeks old, and the bald eagles. And again, there's still quite a few of these animals there. Again, the population pressures haven't pushed them back too much. Um, so the last picture I want to show in this presentation is of Homer on a nice day. This is where the business was began, and where we have held the summer practitioner training, which we will have one this year. We don't have one every summer, but we will have one this summer. I'll say a bit more about that towards the end of the presentation. But this is about a couple hundred yards from where we actually hold the class. I just wanted to give you that image. Nice crop of fireweed growing there. So if anybody has any questions about any of what I've spoken about, please type those in and we'll take a look at them. I also want to talk about the fourth characteristic, which is difficult to illustrate in the slide. So we have the purity of the environment, the quality of adaptation that the plants and people have to have, the transformative energy, which is uh, known because of the fires and the relationship of fire in the environment, and also the volcanoes. We have 75 active volcanoes in Alaska. But the fourth characteristic is what we call the connection to the cosmos. And it's simply saying that there's a lot of plant communities in Alaska that have never seen people. And you're basically then saying, well, what would the main connection that those plants have? And it would be with the cosmos, with the skies, with the stars. And contrast that to someplace where people have been living for thousands of years. Those people have evolved, and the plants around them have evolved a relationship together. And so the plants are more set in their qualities. Whereas in Alaska, there's some openness. There's the ability for nature and the Devic beings, the angelic beings that we have in nature, to actually bring new healing energies onto the planet through these plants going out in these very wild areas. So there's a certain present time uh, response to nature, or from nature, saying, what healing energy do you need now on the planet, or in the near future? And so we just call that connection to the cosmos. So we're out there doing work with plants in areas where very few people have ever gone, and hardly anyone has ever been there working with them on this level. So I will then bring the next presentation up, and this is to Let's see. Well, does anybody have any questions so far? Natalie's asking, we will, and you can just mark this as a yes for every seminar or webinar. We can email you a PDF of one or both of these presentations that I'm giving, and you just need to put that in the chat window. We have your email addresses already, but just say, yes, I'd like one. The recording of this webinar will also be available a couple of days after today, so you can check back on our website under the schedule page, and there'll be a link there to the recording. Amber's very interesting question: how does the methane gas from melting permafrost affect the plants? It's actually not affecting the plants so much, but affecting the atmosphere. So you have, the warming which is taking place in Alaska. In the northern parts of the world and the southern parts of the world, it's getting hotter faster than the middle parts. So this release of methane that's been trapped thousands and thousands of years is adding to that heat. What we are seeing is a sort of a knock-on effect is the range of certain plant families is expanding. Of course, this has been happening forever. But the range where previously you would see a certain plant growing in a certain place, because of the extra warmth, it's expanding out and growing in more places. This is something that they're noticing in the last 20 years, which is a fairly short amount of time. I'm just reading the different questions here. How I got interested in flower essences, when I give a class in person, I usually talk about myself a little bit, but I can respond to that briefly. And that's, I first found out about flower essences because I was looking for help with my own health, my own personal health. And my best friend's brother was one of the first flower essence therapists in the United States. And he said, why don't you get a hold of him and see if he can help you? That's one of the main turning points of my life, because I did contact this amazing man. He set me up with a couple of the Bach remedies, and I started taking those, and a lot of my health issues became much, much better very quickly. And it's what inspired me to find out everything I could about Dr. Bach. And several years later, find myself in Lake Minchumina with the information in how to make essences and living surrounded by millions of acres of wildflowers. So it started from a personal place, and then it became a mission, if you will, something that I knew I needed to do. And I started out with the flower essences because that's what people had done that came before. And then, as you'll hear, I sort of branched out and was called to make the environmental essences and then the gems. Franca is asking, is there more information on which plants are more related to the different environments? That's something that I would need to think about that, but I can email you, Franca, and if I'm pronouncing the name correctly. But this is something that if you read through the information in our living book, which I will talk about towards the end, you can get a free 3-day subscription to that. With each essence, there's information about where it grows and that kind of thing. So that's one easy place to find that information. So let me get back to you on that. Amber is asking about the white fireweed. Was it struck by lightning? White fireweed is what's called an anomaly when you have plants that normally occur in one color, in the case of fireweed being magenta, and then you have a white uh, version coming. It's botanically called an anomaly, but in energy healing, it's a response from the plant community to a particular need on the planet. And if you look at the difference between the magenta fireweed and the white fireweed, it's a much deeper level of healing. So it's really come for helping us with some very, very difficult things. And I would talk more about that in a different presentation. Yeah, and again, whoever wants a PDF, make sure that you uh, tell us, and I have all of these presentations very easily set up to send out to people. So I'm going to go ahead and get going on the three-part system. Again, what we've done here is duplicated what occurs in nature. So in nature, you have the flowers, the gems, the mineral kingdom, and the elemental kingdom. And it's all working together in harmony, and especially in a place like Alaska where it's still in harmony and very intact. So as we went along and developed, first of all, the flowers, and then we got a sense that as we started introducing the other kinds of essences, first were the environmentals and then the gems, that there was a synergy that took place that wouldn't be there if you were just using one. That if you combine uh, two or more out of the three, then you would have the special synergistic power. And so we started to work with that and develop that. It's not something we planned at the beginning, it just sort of we were guided to do that. So I'll go through each kind of essence and talk about um, a little bit about them. And again, this might be a review for some of you. Um, each flower has a particular quality, and uh, we call these positive qualities virtues, if you will. And all plants are like this. Every single plant growing on the planet has a particular quality that it brings through. Now, these qualities are particularly working in the area of our consciousness and our awareness. And so we would be attracted, or we would have a need to flower essence or a flower essence because we want more of that particular quality. I would say that everybody has the potential for all of these qualities, but they could be covered over or just not developed. And so what the flower essences are doing is helping us expand and understanding what's going on with that particular quality, like confidence or trust. What kind of belief systems do I have, or what kind of blocks do I have, emotional blocks or mental blocks? And again, with this expanding power that the flowers have, they're bringing us information and also energy to do something with that information. So Tamarack is saying, well, here's your confidence, and here's what's in the way of it, and I'll help you free your confidence up so that you can, take it out and work with it more and develop it. But I've underlined at the end of this paragraph the word expanding. It's important to remember that it's an expansive process, and especially for people who have never taken flower essences. So in the beginning, they will have an understanding of much more of what's going on, and sometimes it will be a little bit too much awareness. We call that an awareness crisis or a healing crisis. But um, I was very struck when I first got my set of Bach remedies and then other systems that I felt so empowered to have my own healthcare system. Um, I had the books, and so I could educate myself and say, well, this is what's going on with me today or this week, and that I didn't need someone else necessarily to help with that on a day-to-day basis. I do, of course, suggest that people work uh, with themselves and also bring other people in, um, uh, you know, qualified therapists and other therapists, even if you are a qualified therapist yourself. Um, but I love the flowers because there's a sense of empowerment. It's never there's never a judgment and never coming in and saying, oh, it's you're stupid or anything like that. It's no, it's just you have all this potential, and we're going to help you free up that potential so that you can uh, become stronger in all different ways. Um, Now the gems are coming first. If you think about the evolution of the planet, the mineral kingdom was here first, and the plants came later. And so the mineral kingdom actually provided a structure for the growth of the plant kingdom. And it's doing the same thing for us. It's saying, uh, here's some structure and some stability that you can count on, no matter how crazy things are in your life or in the world around you. And so there's this relationship with the physical body, the energy body, and therefore the physical body and the mineral kingdom. And this is very important for people who have been doing practices, meditation, healing, different healing arts um, for quite a long time. And so they have an expanded consciousness, but they're still having problems with the physical body. And so the gems are coming in and saying, uh, perhaps saying to someone who has chronic pain or misalignment, there needs to be some work done with your vibrational structure and therefore your physical body uh, to more easily work with and be a house for this new consciousness. So we're finding the gems to be quite important for that. And again, I've underlined the word contracting. So working with the gems in concert with the flowers are like the inspiration, the in breath, the filling up, and the gems are like the uh, integration, um, actually contracting your energy field so you can integrate that new information and that new awareness. And this is very important because we will get to a point where we can't integrate any more new awareness unless we do something with the physical body. Now, the gem elixirs, very sort of straightforward um, concept how they work, and that's that they look for stress and tension in the energy field. And they will go to, if you work intuitively, especially, you can find uh, gem essences that go to the most uh, tense parts of your structure where the most stress has been built up. And we're talking about an accumulation beyond this lifetime, uh, an accumulation that comes in from our ancestors, from other lifetimes, if you will. And so they're simply going in and saying, they're targeting the stress and the tension, they're releasing it, and then something magical happens, something very wonderful happens. Uh, the entire energy field comes into more alignment because of that stress being released. Now, you might ask, where does the stress come from that's being stuck here? It comes from life. It comes from living, learning, having a lot of learning processes, some of which might have been very difficult. And so we're simply saying that this accumulation of tension can be released, and the natural sort of automatic process of the body coming back into alignment. This is a concept which underlies all vibrational healing, and it's that everyone's energy field, everyone's body has an intelligence um, that will always point and move towards balance, stability, greater balance and stability. And so we don't have to worry about that part. We just have to identify what's in the way of attaining that. And at the end of this paragraph, you'll notice I say resistance to stress. It's actually possible with the continued and long-term use of gem elixirs to build up um, strength in the body where there's such a lack of stress and such a strength that you can do things that used to really stress you out and not have any stress resulting from doing those things. And this is really good. This slide is just to say a little bit more about people who are finding the gem elixirs after having taken essences and then doing other sort of expansive, consciousness expanding things for quite a few years. There's the basics of everybody's health, and that's we all need to sleep well. We need to be able to digest and have a good diet, and we need some good exercise. And if our physical form has chronic issues and chronic pain, for instance, it's going to be difficult to continue to integrate this spiritual growth, and that's why we came to the planet. So what happens when we overextend the physical body's capacity to integrate change is we get sick. And so what we're talking about here with using these essences at this level is getting sick is kind of the old way of going through change. Using essences in a very precise way is the new way. So you don't really have to have these 3-week or month-long bouts of the flu or whatever. And this is simply to sort of summarize that concept. We want to have our energy field and therefore our physical body working in a parallel way of development with our consciousness, so that the body isn't being drugged behind the spirit, if you will, that they're working together, they're moving along in a parallel fashion. And if you're able to do that, you can tell if you're able to do that because you don't have pain in your body and you feel pretty good. You feel a sense of ease in the physical body. Franca is asking, would the gems be especially beneficial for people who are chronically ill or who have physical issues? And that's exactly a big yes. I'll go ahead and talk about it a little bit right now. There's a tendency, and I've also done this in the past, for people who have chronic issues, physical issues, to go to their therapist and say, I need some more essences. And in most cases, they're going to get flowers. And what this does is it will help the person understand why those chronic issues are there, which is good. But if the person doesn't have the strength or the alignment in the physical to bring that kind of awareness into the physical body, those symptoms will not change. So the awareness will continue to grow, but the physical symptoms will stay the same. So if I'm working with somebody who's chronically ill or who has a lot of chronic conditions, I will look very closely at what do they need to stabilize themselves. And it could be a more stable diet, a less inflammatory diet. It could be, um, making some lifestyle changes. But we'll always look at gems to bring some support in that way. And I will often, as a therapist, suggest people not take flower essences and just take gem elixirs and maybe some cell salts just to uh, support the physical body. And they get to a point where then they're ready to take on more of the downloading, if you will, bringing this information down and bringing it into the body. Because once you've done that, then you're done. It's no longer chronic. Um, so what we don't want to do is challenge chronically ill people with too much expansion. We want to give them more of a safe, uh, stable feeling with the essences. Um, Now, one of the reasons that the gem elixirs are able to do this work with stress that could be from a long, long time ago, is because they're going and making these adjustments at the molecular level. Um, if you think of how our bodies are formed in the first place, they're formed mostly of minerals and water. So it's very easy for the mineral kingdom, for the energetic aspect of the mineral kingdom to come in and make those changes. Um, Now to the third kind, and that's the environmental essences. And I will be giving a webinar specifically on the environmental essences on the 7th of May, and that's a free webinar in which I will talk quite a bit about how I made them, why I was called to make them, and I'll go through at least 6 of them in more detail. But for now, simply to say uh, two things. Environmental essences bring us energy, and they bring us clean, pure energy that is uh, balanced with the four elements: air, earth, fire, and water. All of them do that. Some will have more of one than the other. So perhaps Portage Glacier is bringing more water. Uh, Northern Lights is bringing more fire. So this is a way that you can look at those, but they're simply bringing this energy. And so they support any kind of change or transformation at the very basis of who we are, because you cannot change or transform anything if you don't have the energy to do it. So these will often come up for people who are seeking out and are receiving help from different therapists and taking various things. Maybe they have a good diet and so on, but they're not really responding. They're not able to have a uh, easily noticed or a very noticeable response to the things they're doing. And it's simply saying that their energy isn't high enough to integrate that stuff that's coming through. So they may be taking all kinds of things into their body, but they're not being assimilated because they don't have the energy for assimilation. Um, but the environmental essences are supporting any work that we do with the flower essences in the gems. Um, and we talk about creating an inner environment for healing. So if you sit and think about how is my inner environment, how well is my self-care ritual, how developed or mature is my self-care ritual? In other words, how well have I been taking care of myself? Environmental essences can help you, even just by taking one for a few days, to, on the one hand, energize the inner environment, and two, the other thing that all environmental essences do is clear. So there's a cleansing um, energy there. So you're both energizing and cleansing that inner environment, and you'll find that it's easier then to uh, take these steps and move forward in a more noticeable and positive way with the flower essences. And again, we have, if you've studied the Alaskan Essences or taken some classes from me in the past, you'll know that I have developed a new uh, way of space clearing using the Alaskan Essences. And when I started to develop that, it turned out that the environmental essences were the main ones in that area. And so they're very well suited for clearing not only the inner environment, but the outer environment. So our surroundings, moving out from our physical body, uh, where we live, where we work, the time, or the places that we spend the most time, including our vehicles. Uh, so these are going to be helpful for bringing the same level of balance and stability and energy uh, to not only the inner part of us, but also the outer part. Um, and the last sentence here is just how I'll end this particular presentation. And that's when you introduce balanced energy into an area that needs more balance, there's an exchange that takes place 100% of the time, and that's the out of balance energy will leave, and the space or the person will become more balanced and aligned. And again, this is something we don't have to worry about. Uh, it's already built into our systems and built into the intelligence that infuses everything in creation. So I will leave this presentation up here for a second, a few minutes actually. If there are any questions at this point um, about the information that I presented today or anything in general having to do with the Alaskan Essences, then please type those in and we'll um, take a look at it. You have some. So I will take a few minutes. Yeah, and I hope that our connection has been showing consistently strong. So one thing I would mention to people if they're still tuned in is it's much better to do this webinar in front of a computer instead of a phone or a tablet. Um, if it's possible to do that, you might have better luck. Um, so I'll make some announcements while we're waiting for some questions. Uh, I did mention the webinar on the 7th of May on the environmental essences. We will also have one on the 14th of May that uh, Judith and I will be doing together on using the Alaskan Essences with animals. The registration will be open for that one in a couple of days, and that will be our first paid webinar. I'm really looking forward to working with Judith on that. She's an amazing animal communicator and animal therapist. And we also have the practitioner training in Alaska in the last week of June, first few days of July. There's information about that on our website under the education link. And if you have any particular questions about that, please contact me. It's a wonderful opportunity, which doesn't happen every year. And there's still room in that class. Natalie is asking, will there be a seminar on the flowers? Yes, we're just getting started on the webinar. We're sort of starting with the basics. We've done the gems and we'll be doing the environmental. So yes, there will be one. uh, stay tuned for that. And we are very much interested in taking your suggestions for different webinars. Each time we do one, we're looking at the chat log and taking that into consideration. Amber asks, the webinar on the 7th on environmental essences is complimentary. The one on the 14th is a paid webinar. I believe it'll be $25, so quite um, reasonable. We are looking at, Natalie's asking about a practitioner seminar online. We are looking at putting together modules for that kind of a training. So a distant learning, which would involve more of an interactive version of what we're doing here, where each person would actually be able to speak and be seen. We're, excuse me, researching that and learning how that might go. But it probably would be towards September before we'd have something like that together. Natalie's asking, can you combine the Bach and the Alaskan Essences? That's a big yes. One of the things that I normally say about our three different kinds of essences is there's no bias in nature. There's no rules in nature saying you can't do this with that or blend these things together. So you can use any system of essence, any system from any place on the planet with any other system, and you can use all different kinds of essences together. Now, you want to be precise and have a really clear intention, uh, not be addressing 10 things, but maybe just one or two things. And then you can come up with a nice blend using essences from different parts of the world and come up with a beautiful bouquet for somebody. So by all means, I have about 750 essences that I use in my practice, and I love seeing the different blends come together. Natalie's asking, again, do you have a combination to aid memory and concentration? And yes, we do. If I could only remember what it was. It's a joke. I need my little joke sign that I can hold up. It's called Easy Learning. And I happen to have a bottle right here. Okay. I have a bottle right here because I use it whenever I teach, and I use it in every classroom. So easy learning is helping both memory and concentration. You can read more about it on our website. Daniela. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure about your question. I would say that the Alaskan Essences, if you were able to see the first presentation, there's a gift or a particular maybe handful of gifts that each system will bring. And Alaska Essences bring energy for movement, for transformation, and a deep level of support from the elements. And so, some of the other, I won't speak for the other systems, but I work with a lot of them and have done so for about 30 years. When I see the combination coming up and I see the Alaskan Essences in there, I'm like, okay, well, there may be a couple of gem elixirs in there to stabilize what's happening with these other flowers from FES or from the Netherlands. There might be an environmental essence in there just to give that formula more energy. So you can just think about it that way. But I would say that, yeah, it's about energy, it's about movement, it's about transformation. And of course, the easiest way to understand this is to come to Alaska. And I say that, of course, because I want to be able to continue to teach up there. But I also think that everybody who's interested in vibrational healing should go to these places and experience it firsthand if you're able to. Um, we collect information and research. We have done so from the very beginning. And we have a lot of people saying that uh, the Alaskan essences, when they started taking them, seem to work really quickly. And that's one of the reasons. They're very catalytic and they can move things forward, but in a easier way. So with the essence, with the energy and the stability, you can move forward in an easier way. And that's what we want to do. We don't want to cause people to become uncomfortable because of the essences they're taking as a general rule. Um, Frank, in the Amazon essences classified the vicious mushrooms. Franco's question, very good question. I don't know how well I can answer it because it would probably take 25 to 30 minutes, but um, we have categories such as the orchids. The orchids, we have 12 orchid essences now. That's a very distinct category and brings a certain frequency of energy in, if you will, that you don't find anywhere else outside of the orchid kingdom. Um, I would say that you could look at the Alaskan essences from trees. That would be another very distinct category that you could get to know and have some understanding. But I would say, in comparison to the Amazon, um, we have a lot less variety. Uh, again, only 6 different kinds of trees. And so there's more of a, um, instead of going to an environment where you have thousands of different kinds of flowers, you go to an environment where you have one kind of flower that can cover 100,000 acres. So I think that would be maybe a way to look at it. I do have and can send you by email uh, uh, a paper that we put together that shows the botanical families for each of the flower essences that we have in our system. And so you can see from, if you're a botanist, you can see it from that level. And it's interesting for some people. Um, so, really appreciate the interaction here. It really helps to get the questions. Hi, Helen. Um, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I believe that the Alaskan essences are bringing to the world is this intact energy, and the animals will recognize that very clearly. They don't go into their minds or get mental about it. And so I love seeing the interaction between nature via the essences and the dogs or the cats or the horses, and you can just stand there and watch it happening right away. People, it takes a little bit longer sometimes. Um, so I would say there's another piece with the Alaskan essences for people living in the northern areas of the world, and so that would include Canada, Scandinavia. Um, some of that energy is the same, and some of the plants are actually the same, so that it might be touching into something that that you visited in your life as a child, perhaps. Um, Jamie, we have not done that kind of study of the imprints under a microscope. I do know of, I believe FES from California has done some of that. And I can't remember anybody in Europe who's done that. I think there are people who've probably done that with Bach remedies. Um, we would love to have funding to do various kinds of research to get more into the science. Uh, but it's interesting because what I often tell people is that it's not that, well, the research of essences worldwide is waiting for science to catch up. It's waiting for people to develop scientific apparatus that are capable of really testing accurately what essences are doing. People's awareness and understanding similar to many of you, what you have when you take an essence and you sense that is far beyond the scientific apparatus at the moment. So there's some catching up to do. Nice. So it's a nice excuse me. I'm just thanking folks here for having this nice chat conversation. Um, I guess I'm sort of inspired to say something in response to what some of you are writing right now, and that's that there has been a certain amount of dogma and rules created around flower essence therapy in the last 70 years, 75 years. Um, and one of the things that I like to think, uh, well, on the one hand, I don't think that's necessary. I think that there need to be guidelines and very clear understandings of how to use them and how to be very precise. But I think we should not lose track of how simple and direct this can be. And what I like about the Alaskan, uh, what I get from Alaska when I go up there, and what I like from this work is they're constantly coming through and saying to us, just let it in, just open to it. That's all you have to do. So this image that Franca was talking about of dreams of mountains, rivers, uh, this is basically having a direct connection with nature. We always suggest people get as much as possible through the pictures or however they want to study the essences, get a direct connection with that environment or that plant or that mineral. And then amazing, wonderful things will happen. Keep it simple. Don't, uh, I guess on a group level or on a social level, we always want to try to make things more difficult. But I think in this area, we don't really want to. Keep it simple, keep it easy. Jane has carried out botanical research in plant succession in glacial environments. Wow, I'd love to see that. Um, I have, Jane, I have definitely seen, because I've spent about 35 years wandering around glaciers and some. And what you'll see is the plants that are, again, the earth healers. River Beauty, in particular, is one that will grow um, where the glaciers have been or where there's been a flood. So you can identify different plants uh, growing in these watery habitats. Soapberry is often found when the glacier recedes. Yellow dryas as well. Um, that's something that you will notice just driving around Alaska or even northern Canada. Um, so we call these pioneering plants. They've come in first as soon as the ground was opened up, and they've come in and cultivated that area. And So if you read about yellow dryas in a living book, which yes, I need to mention that, that's a really good illustration of what I mean by that. So yes, it's a wonderful part of the world, so you can see these things happening, whereas the ice has been gone from most of the rest of the world for quite a long time. If I had to choose the top 3 Alaskan essences to talk about more in detail, which would you choose? That's a really hard question. Um, it would depend on the audience, and really hard. We have over 200 essences. It'd be kind of hard to narrow it down to 3. But I think I could give you one flower, one environmental, and one gem, just because they're sort of a good representation, if you will, um, of those different communities. And so for the gems, it would be emerald. Um, for the environmentals, I would say rock spring. And for the flowers, alpine azalea. Um, I do want to mention, we've got a few more minutes, that we do not have a book out uh, in print, but we do have something called the Living Book, which is our online repertoire. And I do have the intention of printing this at some point in the future. But if you go to our homepage, there'll be a link on the main menu there for the Living Book, and you can read about it. You can get a 3-day free membership, so you can go in and look around. And at this point in time, the one-time fee of $35 for lifetime membership. We call it the Living Book because it is constantly being updated. For instance, in a couple of days, I'm going to start putting audio clips in so you can read about the essence and also hear me talking about it, taken from some of the workshops that I've done. It's a wonderful resource, uh, also affirmations, keywords, and the latest information we have on the essence. So, for instance, this summer I will be making some essences over again, and we will update uh, as soon as possible. So it's a constantly expanding resource of information. I highly encourage anybody who's interested in the Alaskan Essences to check it out. And again, eventually we will print that. Um, so Natalie's asking, do you have any studied aid essences for the acupoints? We have not done anything ourselves. My acupuncturist here has done some work, and I will be seeing her next week, and I will ask her that very question and get back to you, Natalie. There are a number of acupuncturists around the world that are working with essences and are starting to make these maps. It's sort of in its infancy, if you will, but I will check on that. It's something I'm very interested in as well. Okay, a couple more things, and then we'll close the video and audio part of this. The webinar that we did last week on embracing uncertainty with gem elixirs that recording is available. It will eventually live on our YouTube channel, which we're just starting to put together. Right now, the link is to Vimeo. I will probably change that today, but you can watch that online, and the gems that we talked about in that presentation, or that I talked about in that presentation, and all of the rest of the research gems are on sale until the end of April, 25% discount. So you might, if you miss that, we will eventually have a library on our website. We'll have a listing of links for past webinars. You can go in and get uh, a link, find a link to either download them. But I would caution you, they're about 300, 350 megabytes, so you have to have some space on your hard drive. And Natalie's asking, is a way to get the info? I'm not sure what she's talking about. Yeah, I will email it directly to Natalie as soon as I get something. Yeah, so I think we'll bring it to a close. I would like to thank everybody for attending. And it's been a pleasure. I'm starting to get a sense of how all this works, and so I'm having a little bit more fun as well. Yeah, so we will bring this to a close, and if you still need to type in some information or whatever that'll be, the chat will still be available for a few minutes afterwards. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.